Well, welcome everyone. Right now we have 20 bass drummers online here, which is great, or at least people that are interested in bass drumming. Um, Welcome to the MWPBA Education Series. This will be the last one of the year since our season starts next month, actually in just 4 weeks. So this will be the last one of the year. We're happy to have Ben Elkins with us tonight. Ben is the bass drummer of the City of Dunedin Pipe Band and a longtime bass drummer. And I heard Ben play at Winter Storm this year. And when he was done, I just kind of said, wow, that was really good. So I said, well, he's going to be our bass instructor for our series. So he was kind enough to go ahead and do this for us. And you didn't come online tonight to hear me talk. So Ben, take it away.
Cool. Well, Jim, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate you asking me to hop on here. I certainly have a passion for bass drumming. And so I'm happy to talk and share whatever information I have and answer some questions. I did have a few people reach out to me and give me a few things they want to make sure I covered. And so I'll make sure I cover those tonight. And I'll also open it up to you to give me some questions or that you have on your end. I'll also say if you're not muted, and you can mute in the bottom left-hand screen, that'll help. If you have a question, just following up for Steve there, you can unmute and feel free to ask me questions. I'll start off telling you a little bit about my background here. I was originally a piano player, was my first instrument, and I learned classical piano and played trumpet, and I played in marching bands and percussion, which led me through jazz band, playing both on piano and as a trumpet player. And right around high school, about 1995, no, I'm dating myself a little bit, I started playing Scottish snare drum. So I started in a grade 5 band, the Tidewater Pipes and Drums. And from there, I went on to college and played in the St. Andrews College Pipe Band in 1999. So I went from the grade 5 to grade 3 band. And that fall, I ended up joining the City of Washington Pipe Band, which had just won the grade 2 Worlds that year and went into grade 1. So in 2000, I went over and competed with the City of Washington Pipe Band there. And I think that year was really what opened up my bass and tenor ear, because the 78 Frasers had come down and I was watching everything Tyler and Haas and Reagan Jones were doing in the band there, and then overseas at the Cowell Championships when I got to watch them, and then really got my first World CD. Used to travel around, had the subwoofer in my car and used to listen to all the midsection things going on between bass and tenor, and thought I was really cool showing up at the Highland Games listening to all that. So that was my initial introduction probably into really understanding and listening to higher level midsection playing. And when I took over the St. Andrews Drum Corps there, I kind of dove into writing my own parts in the bass and tenor. And reason I bring that up here is our topic today is kind of talking about solo bass drumming versus band bass drumming, and understanding what's going on in the music. How do you get there? How do you know that you're playing the right stuff? So I'll open up with the first thing, which would be a practice routine, and just ask a couple people if you have something that you have a question about practice, or if you have a good practice routine within your bass section that you utilize. I'll open it up here for just a couple seconds. Does anybody have something they want to add in? All right, well, I'll lead off here and say, for me, I think one of the most important things for bass drummers is that when you go to band practice, you are one of the few instruments, along with the tenor player, that doesn't have somebody else playing your own part. So a bagpiper can show up and they're standing next to somebody else that's playing the part. A snare drummer can show up, and they can't, even though we're supposed to practice in advance and then we're supposed to show up at practice and rehearse, we don't have a chance to really hear somebody else play our music correctly. So I think it's really important to utilize your practice at home. And the way that I do that, the tool that I use, is I sit down and I make a recording of what I'm playing. So I'll get a recording at band practice, and I'll come home, and even though I'm playing on the bass there, I will get a hard surface mallet.
So yeah, I'd like to have her not forget to actually.
Yep, perfect. Got a mute there. So I'll take the back of my snare stick, which I like to do instead of the front of my snare stick here, because I think it gives me a little bit more weight, like I would feel off of a bass mallet. Okay, and I'll use this as a practice at home. And I will literally just tap out my beats looking at the music and make a recording of that. And then I put the music away, because the music really becomes a crutch for us in the process. So go to band, sure, look at your music. You can play along to it, but as long as that music's out, you're really kind of leading yourself down a path of relying on it. And you really want to try to get off of that music earlier the better. And the only time you're going to hear it is if you're sitting there and you've actually tapped out. So I'll look at the music. I'm going to tap out the beats that I'm playing on that. And then I'm going to close the music and I'm going to listen back and see if I have that music memorized and I can play it. And I will do that over and over. I'll listen to it in the car. I'll listen to it out on a run or a walk with my dog or something. And I'm listening to that so it's ingrained in my head. Really, you want to get to the point that you wouldn't have to listen to the recording and you can listen from start to finish and be able to play that. And there's a number of reasons I really think that's important. Whether you're a solo player or a band player there, when you're doing that, it's going to build your confidence up in what you're playing. So when you walk out on the field, you can get your arms swinging in a fluid motion, right? Instead of like, oh, I just memorized it and I'm sitting here playing in my comfort zone and getting the notes out. You can get your arms moving. That's one side of it. The other side, from a band perspective, is that when you go to band practice, that's really the only time you're going to hear the other notes played in your midsection, and whether your bass notes are lining up with what's going on in the center section too, because they all have an individual note that's being played as well. And how is that working between what's on paper and what's transpiring to the musical ear? So if you wait to get your memorization going, or you're showing up and you're not playing the notes right all the time, then you never know if what's on paper is actually right that you're trying to practice at home. So the sooner that you can get that going and get off the paper and play, then you'll kind of know if this is working or it's not working. So I really encourage everyone to do that. I encourage our midsection to do that here with me. And then we sit down and we listen to everybody's parts. Last thing you want to do is wait till you've got it memorized and it's the week of the contest and you show up at practice and you're so excited you got it off, and you get there and you hear that it doesn't really work right with what's going on either in the music, maybe in the drumming or the piping, or with the midsection that's playing that with you. So I highly encourage people to use that as a tool. I use voice recording on the iPhones. I don't know what they have for Samsung options, but I will utilize that. I'll turn on my iPad and play one recording and make the recording on my iPhone, or turn on the metronome and play along to that. And that really helps you ingrain some of those notes, especially as a bass player, when you have space notes in between where you're playing. Having that metronome and getting used to hearing that click in the back of your head when you're playing is really going to help you kind of count out that timing. Does anybody have a question about kind of getting music memorization there going, or if you're having a struggle with memorizing your music that you'd like to share?
I have a technical question.
Yes.
Can anybody else see Ben instead of the music? When I have on speaker view, I'm only seeing the music.
Okay. Well, let me turn this off, and then Jim and me will just.
So you maybe have to change your view, John.
Okay, I'm seeing Jim now.
Yeah, you have to go up to your view and change your view.
Well, I've changed it to speaker, and when I change it to speaker, all I see is the music.
Yeah, that's okay. Change it to gallery.
Yes, when I change it to gallery, I can see him then.
Okay. Yeah, just leave it there.
Okay. Okay, fine. No problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else having a technical issue separate from that, or I'll wait and see if anybody chimes in.
Now I can only see you. I don't see any music.
Perfect. I turned off the screen share. We're going to try that. If you can see me, that's good for now. We're going to use that music at the end. And just we were kind of playing around with it earlier, make sure that we have access to it. Does anybody have questions on how they can get better at memorizing their music? Cool. The other thing that I want to talk about as a smaller subject is what are you playing for your mallets or your sticks? And you know, I don't have a special recipe, a one size fits all for you, but I think it's kind of a topic that you should be thinking about in what style of a bass drummer you are and what types of things that you're doing on your bass drum. That bass drum mallet, there's lots of great mallets that are out there. I'm particular to a set of mallets that I really like because I think that it gives me lots of clarity when I want to play soft in the soft ranges. I feel like I can get those notes. And I think it also can climb and take me to higher level volumes when I'm playing as well. So I am partial to those. I play those bass drum mallets, and the reason I bring it up is people would describe it as maybe too heavy. They're called the max attack sticks. And some people would say that maybe that's too loud. I do play those sticks in solos, and I played them in the indoor contest there in Winter Storm as well. Now, I'm thoughtful when I go into a room and play those mallets. I'm thinking about my volume and my control, which I'm constantly working on. Reason I brought up memorization is because as soon as you get off the memorization, you can start playing around in the volumes of the music that you're doing and getting different sounds out of the bass drum once you're comfortable with the underlying rhythms that are there. So I mentioned that if you're playing, you know, a few more notes in your solo performance versus your band that you're playing, and you might be reading on a score sheet that you're not getting a clarity in sounds, you maybe look at adjusting that, okay? And that can adjust from the player that can do it, and you can adjust it from the mallet. I'm a big fan of, I think the player should adapt to the stick, but I mostly think you should play what you're comfortable with, because when you're comfortable with that mallet, you're going to be able to do a lot more on the drum than somebody else who's not as comfortable with that mallet. Okay. Throw out a few like getting contest ready things. I know I already talked to you about a snare stick. You could get a timpani mallet, something at home. The reason that I'm suggesting to use something like this that has a little bit of weight at the end there for you is when you take that bass drum mallet and you hit it on the hard table, you start to beat the stuffing out of it, right? And you start to adjust the inside of it. It's going to take away the tonal qualities you can get. The other aspect of that is oftentimes see people go to beat those on the top of a table. In order for you to make enough contact to get a sound out of that table when you're playing on top of it, you're overplaying at that point. Okay, so if I take this stick, and I don't play with it on this stand like this, but I have it set up for this scenario, but I do play right on this Hugh Cameron pad, and I work on all my volumes when I'm playing. So that's a practice tool that I use at home, that I don't have to overplay this pad to get a sound out of it. All right. And that I'm going to use in my same motions when I'm starting to play on bass drum. And I want to get the same similar types of swings out of my playing. And it's at a different level. I know the bass drum is going to be up here, right? And this is probably my center point on the bass drum. When I'm on the harness, it's going to be up here. But I'm going to practice at home right here, so I can get different volumes out of what I'm playing. Which I'll also throw up, got this on a stand right now. Well, this stand is not at the level that I'm going to play when I go to put this drum on, and it's on the harness and it's up here. So when I go to band practice, I encourage all of us to get on the drum. Even when the snares are practicing on their pads, I get on the drum, right? I want to hear what each part and each note's doing and how my volume is working, and I want to practice to that, because that's the closest it's going to be when I'm going to play in the band circle. So those are food for thoughts. We'll talk about like some volume things later. Is anybody else using something different than a bass drum mallet when they're practicing at home?
I have an old mallet that came apart. The outer sections came apart.
Yep.
I'm playing the core of the mallets, and they're perfect. This will work if you have some old mallets hanging around. You might try to take off the outer layers of the foam.
Yep. Yeah, if you can get it down to where it's giving you, where you're getting a cleaner sound from that mallet a little bit sooner than what the full, puffed mallet is going to give you, then one, you're not beating it up, but two, you're not practicing to overplay to get the sound out of that mallet head, right? And I know I'm not aware of a bass drum mallet that's made as a practice. I know some tenor players do have something like that. I just kind of utilize this. Sometimes if I overplay, my hands hurt, and I think that reminds me that I'm playing it too hard. If I get too excited and I play and I hit too hard, it kind of reminds me, okay, like that weight on the end, I need to back that off, and I need to think about my weight when I'm playing. Anybody else have a practice mallet that they use?
Ben, this is Cliff Davis.
Hi, Cliff.
Hey, yeah, I use the exact same setup, a Cameron pad and some ancient Kilpatrick KP3 sticks as my practice setup. And when I have it on the table, I actually will play on the edge of that pad in addition to in the center of the pad to change the tonal, variation there. And that works very, very well. So I'm glad to see you do the same thing. Now, if I could just play, that'd be even better.
Boy, and I'm glad you brought that up because I actually do the same thing. I like to play off of the side of this pad, just how you described it. I'm not sure if you can see the pad here or there, but I like to play off of the side when I'm playing. It's sitting in my lap. It's just a good, reminder of, kind of where the center of the drum is going to be when I'm doing that. Anybody else have another practice routine they do? Or practice mallet? Looking for anybody who wants to share that. My last two would be that if I'm in a hotel room and I'm traveling and I can't really take out the bass and play, I'll sometimes just take the mallet here and I think about where the center focal point is of that. Try to see if you can see that here, and I think about where the center of that bass drum is. And you can stand in the mirror and use that as a practice. So I'll listen to the recording that I've been practicing along to, which kind of reinforces those beats in the back of my head when I'm playing, because it keeps me from using the music as a crutch for memory. And I'll use this as a point to practice and think about where I'm striking in the middle here on the bass. I've done that. And say I'm on the bus on the way, sometimes I'll put my recording on and I just like to listen to it. And sometimes I'll just kind of snap through my beats on the way. I kind of like to listen to it a couple times, and then when I get to the actual contest, I'll put these same exact headphones on, or different pair, and I like to get on the drum and just have a little bit of warm up and just make sure I've got two really good runs. I feel really confident before going and getting with usually the snare core, which kind of brings up another point too. If you're only practicing to the piping and you're really fixated on that, and then you go and you play with the drum corps, it can be really hard unless you really know that pipe tune to sing. So I was cramming music this past season because I stepped in about 6 weeks before the first contest, and I was trying to learn the music, and I was listening on the piping more in my recording than I had the snare. And then you show up for the snare for the first time, and it's a little different than what you're used to practicing to. So changing up those norms, if you're at band practice, make a recording of the snare section playing that, and then go home and take a hard mallet, look at the music, and tap out what you're supposed to play rhythmically. You can close that music and start letting it kind of morph into your brain where those right beats are supposed to be. So hopefully some of those tools will help you. It's good to know a little bit earlier if something should be changed in the music there. So that kind of talks through some of my practice routines. The other thing I wanted to mention here and this would go for band or solo, would just be, for me, one of the most important things is when the band or I'm standing in front of a judge and we're getting ready to call the tempo off to get playing. That is the biggest moment. All eyes are on you as a bass drummer. And is the bass drummer watching the pipe major? When they're calling off the tempo, are you in sync? So, you know, I'm watching and I'm kind of counting here. It's just my thing. You don't have to do this. This is not a right or wrong, but I want to make sure I'm right in sync with where that pipe major and the foot is. I'm also thinking about how they're singing the tune, how this is going to go, and when they're going to call the right, quick, march. I start double timing in my head. So the right, quick, march. Into that. All right. That makes sure that I stay steady with where I'm at when I go to take that step, that I don't start to falter, right? And I'm keeping right in the tune. So my teeth will grit it. Dentist doesn't love that, but my teeth will grit it in the back, and I'm totally watching that. Okay. Now, if it's your solo contest, you should, in my opinion, you should be the one that's calling that off. It's your contest, and you have a piper and a snare drummer that's playing to that. So I'm calling the right, quick, march. I'm doing a double time, and that's really, really important. I think that fills in those gap areas for you to keep you right on the beat from where you call it off. And of course, you always want to look for those 3 beats to be just dead even, beautiful tone coming out of that drum when you're playing it, and those first 2 3-beat roll-ups that are coming out of that, right? So I'm always thinking pipe majors up there where I'm calling that, how I'm playing, where I'm striking. Me personally, I want to leave a little bit of room in the tank that when I go to start into that tune, that then I give a little bit of volume in the downbeat of that start of the tune. So I'm thinking in the that gives a little bit more oomph than where my 3-beat roll off is. Anybody have questions about 3-beat roll offs? Questions about what I'm doing there? Concerns? Struggle with that?
Ben, I've got a couple of questions that were actually posed in last month's seminar on ensemble. One would be, what do you do, which happens in all grades, I would say, when the pipe major counts off the start, then you hit that first note of the tune and the pipers slow down, and now you have 2 different tempos going on between the pipes and the snares.
What do I do?
What should someone do?
I think if you're really steady on the beat, and your pipe major and your lead drummer are going to trust you on that, and you probably have built a relationship that they trust how that goes. Now, there is for sure a balance of how that should all start. I typically start by I encourage people to listen to the pipe major when they're up there singing the tune. I like when the pipe major sings the tune, and then they're going to start to call it off at the tempo that they're singing it. I think that's really important, that people are listening and paying attention. And the upper grade level bands, you got to be right on it when they call that off. So there can be a little bit of a balancing act. Other than that, I would say that if that happens in a contest, then you go with where the pipe major is. If it's a contest thing, a day of, I'm probably not mentioning it, right? I'm just gonna probably just go with where the pipe major wants it to go, because that's where it needs to be. It's not something that you're gonna fix, in my opinion. At every level, it's not something you can fix quickly or easily. That would hopefully be something that we practiced a lot earlier on. If it's later towards the contest, go with where the pipe major is. That would be the default. And depending on your situation and your relationship with the pipe major there, then I would say, hey, could we work on this and see if you can get your pipe major and lead drummer to get together and say, could we just get together and start working on some tempos and calling off to make sure that we're all really well locked in together. And I think that could be a way to approach the conversation. Then you're wrong, or you're late, or you're out, right? There's so many other things that all the players are thinking of in that moment. And if you three can get in sync better, then that's going to help transfer that over to the band.
Another question that came up last month was, some people call it the crab walk, where the bass drummer goes in sideways kind of to try and position the drum towards the ensemble judge, wherever they may be. What's your thoughts on that?
I like the crab walk. The bass drum is too high for me to see over, to be honest. So if I'm walking straight into the circle and it's up, I really can't see where I'm going. That's harder for me in the practice runs because there's no lines and there's no crowd. At the contest, I really haven't had that much problem walking in forward, and mostly kind of started doing it because it seemed that more all the top bands are kind of walking in straight on the bass drum instead of doing the crab walk. I like the crab walk because I can see, right? I can see left, right, and I don't worry about if I'm going to trip into like a pothole or something like that, or a divot in the grass. But when we do that in just an open parking lot on a practice, it's really hard. And I'm sure that I'm doing like this as I go down the road. But if I'm doing it and I got the pipers on each side, I can pretty much tell where I'm supposed to be lined up as far as marching and playing. I can see them and I just kind of lock on them. And I know as soon as the pipers go to get into formation, into the square, that, okay, I'm probably pretty close in the middle of the circle here because they're forming into their square before they get into the circle. So I just kind of utilize where the pipers are on either side of me to get in there. I don't have a right wrong answer there on that. I can say that I just tried to mimic in a band setting for a contest what I see other bands doing, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna follow that. So I previously crab walked. I like the crab walk. I think it gives the sound all the way through the band that way. When I watch a bass drummer walk straight in from an audience perspective, my favorite thing is when they turn and I can get all the effects of the bass drum in the midsection going. So I've not heard that there's a right or wrong, or that that's going to gig you in a contest. If anybody has, welcome to share and tell me, but I haven't heard that that's something that really is a grading issue. I would probably revert to what you're comfortable with. Depends on your band and kind of depends on what your lead drummer and pipe major want, I guess. So,
great, thanks.
Yeah, of course. Next thing I kind of wanted to dive into here with you guys is kind of talking about, there's going to be some separation in this conversation in differences between what you can do in a solo and what you can do in a band. And if you're doing a solo tune thing, which I encourage you to get out and do solos, because you're going to get more feedback on what you're doing and what you're playing when you go out and do that. For me, it also is a little bit more heightened. The focus is on you, right? Go for the most stressful thing, because then when you walk in and play with the band, it's probably lowered some of that stress down. You've already had your most stressful run, which is how I've sometimes felt in the past. But most importantly is your preparation before. And I know it's really hard to get a piper and a drummer to play for you. So what I would encourage you to do is you got to start with one or the other, and then you got to find somebody that can match them. And if you're looking for a snare drummer, what tunes are they playing? Are they playing solos? What solo tunes are they playing? And can you take that and utilize that for your own playing? If they enjoy playing it, or it's something they're gonna work at to be better for themselves, it's gonna be 10 times better when you go out there to play your contest than if it's a tune that, oh, I really didn't have time to get to that. Oh, I really couldn't learn that. So try to find something that they enjoy playing and that you can agree upon between piper and drummer. I look for things that have rhythmic things in there that I can hear, that I can kind of create my own tunes or own scores too. And I really enjoy that freedom and what I want to do there. I always try to establish the idiom, and this would be for both band or for solos. When I get into the tune, I want to make sure I'm establishing what that tune and an underlying bass should sound like. I'm going to back it up before I get into that and just kind of say that I did play bass drum in a marching band in middle school, and a lot of the American rudimental stuff that we play, you've got bass drums at different volumes and quads and stuff like that, but it's all driven to marching. You got right. You've got these rhythms that are going on, and it can be all just kind of one volume going, and it's loud, and it's just to that left foot that they're playing to. So when you think about the pipe band drumming, on the snare side is, when Alex Duffert kind of came in and took a drum set sound and equated that into pipe band drumming, that kind of gave this jazz feel, this dot cut rhythms that are going on. So you get a little bit more swing, and that swing should not only be rhythmic, but it should be melodic to the tune, right? So now you've got a sound that sounds more like, when you get into, instead of the open rolls and the American stuff, you get into close up. This is this, it 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 is this. A little bit more swing, right? A little bit more jazz, a little bit more jazz sound. And what you should be thinking about when you're playing the bass drum is more of how a jazz drum set player would play and how that incorporates. Okay, so you're always going to have an underlining bass that's going to establish what your tempo is, and then you're going to add in the other tenors, if you will, doom doom da doom doom da doom, right? And how does that all incorporate itself? Sometimes the bass is still just clicking right through that if you watch those guys play, right? And sometimes it could be the finishing note of where the tenors are. But volume isn't overpowering, right? It's not a heavy metal rock band, goom goom ga da 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 da, right? It's not this big overpowering thing. I would also equate, if you're listening for ways to incorporate your bass drum playing into the band, is more of an orchestral effect. If you listen to percussion in a symphony or concert band format, it's something that should be complementing the music, all right? It's not so driven to be marching band to be left, 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 right? It should have a little bit more melodic flow in that. And oftentimes what I hear is just one volume being played in bass drumming. And there's really so many other things that you can do, even if you're just playing a march. There's a lot more things that you can do in volume, and you can look at what's going on in the piping, what's going on in the snare drumming, how can you complement that, and how does that play in if you're playing with a midsection that has notes and rhythms there too. So I always use Scott and the Brave because it's most common for people to think about in this retrospect, where a bass drummer is going to play downbeat, 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 downbeat in the tune, right? And then you've got where you have down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. So when you're thinking about these in just the basic format, thinking about dum bum ba dee dum dee dum dee dum dee dum dee da dee dum ba dee da dee dum bo dum dum, just as one phrase, right? So I kind of went ahead and just kind of played how I would think about that tune in just a flat hitting where the pipers are hitting longer notes. And then when they're playing more notes, I'm going to get busier. I'm not saying you should go out and just play busy in all the busy parts. Okay. You want to think about where you're tastefully going to put in those busy parts and not just play busy all of the time. And then how can you adjust that in your playing? The other side of that would be if the midsection is playing, where are you supporting the band in playing that downbeat, right? And so you're driving tempo. And when do you get into maybe a syncopated, offbeat, upbeat part of the music? And how is that incorporated in when you've got a tenor playing at the same time? And you can listen, if you go on and you listen to even top drum corps that are excellent, you'll hear different styles of the bass drum playing, and then the tenor's playing, and then the bass drum playing, and then the tenor's playing, right? That's one. And you could say that there is back and forth between bass and tenor. Yes, sometimes a call and answer is a good thing, and that could be important. But the next part of that is the bass really could be a voice in the midsection, ding 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 ding, where you become a volume and a note in that. All right, and you can do a run like that and go back and still go boom 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 ding 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 ding, right? So I'm establishing time, boom 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 ding 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 ding, and now I'm a note. Okay, a couple variances are in that. Tenor section's running down, and then you're going to play that note. How loud should that note be? I think it depends on where that note ends. Okay, where is that note ending in the end of that tenor run? Is it supposed to be a big downbeat note? And when I say big, I mean something that the pipe section is going to be stressing when they're playing. Are the snares going to be loud in that section when they play? That will tell you kind of where your volume is, because otherwise, for me, my preference would be that if I am just playing something that's kind of a little bit of a note at the end of the run, I'm probably just going to hit the note, because it's going to sound more volume aligned with where the tenors are playing that rundown. Smaller drums aren't going to put out as much volume as you are as the bass drummer. So I think understanding a little bit of that, I'm going to go back to the share screen here. Let me just ask, does anybody have questions there about kind of what I'm bringing up in points and understanding your role as the bass playing and establishing the time, establishing the idiom, and then maybe being a part of a midsection run and going back to being more of a bass role? Does anybody have a thought, question? Everybody's good? Okay. I think the one thing that comes up is a lot of times people don't really know what they're supposed to do to get that if they don't have somebody writing the music for them. They're not really sure how that would work. So I'm going to show you this first. Does everybody see that score there? Did I lose you?
You see it. Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I can't see you. I see the music. So all right, cool. Want to make sure that's up. So you got a basic snare score here. And then what do you do in the midsection to complement it? I'm going to play two little things here for you. Just going to get the tune in your head to think about here for a second. All right. You can hear that audio okay?
Yep.
Cool. I'm going to play one different version. And when you're looking along with this, whoever you are in the room, whether you're a piper or a drummer, look along in the rhythms of this score once through. And then I'm going to change how we're kind of looking at this. So we all understand this is in 4/4 time, which means there's 4 beats in each of those bars. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add in the snare, because you're hearing the melody, right? But now what's the snare doing? And I've already talked about how the snare should really be not only rhythmic, but it should be melodic to what the tune is doing. But there's one other thing that the snare can do for us, and even percussion, is you can provide a rhythmic context to what you're doing that may not exactly go directly with the melody the whole time, okay? And one of those things is, you probably heard the, if you go to a stadium, I'll play the recording here. If you ever go to a stadium, you probably heard this played. Okay, you guys get the idea. That's a simple boom boom chat, boom boom chat that struck something that was memorable for people around the world, right? You can take little rhythmic things and add it in to a melody to complement it, and it doesn't have to directly follow what's going on in that melody. So I want to bring that up because I'm going to play Scotland the Brave here for you with both the piping and the snare played here, so you can kind of get an idea of where I'm going. So if you follow along rhythmically here of how this score goes, and if you're not a snare player, try to just take out some of the extra stuff and look at the rhythm in the bottom, follow the bottom rhythmic notes underlined there. All right. And I'm going to dive into that. If you feel a little lost, that's okay. I'm going to try to make it make sense here for you in a second. All right, bear with me 1 second, and I'm going to switch us to this screen. So if you're wondering what I was saying, when you're looking at underlying rhythms that are under there and you're not a snare player, and I know this looks messy because I want you to see where I took the white out and I took the roll patterns out, and I went for just the underlying rhythms here, okay? And if you look at how that goes, and then you can break this down and you'll see, if you look at bar 1, da, 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 that goes exactly to dum, bum, ba, da, da, dee, da. It goes right along with what the melody is doing in the piping there, all right? This, in a basic format, is going to open up where you're going to start thinking about a bass playing 1, 2, 3, 4, and where a tenor might come in that bop, bop, beep, bop, bop, bop. All right. That is where you would want, if you're looking at where you should play, look at the snare score, take out the flams, the drags, the rolls, all that extra stuff, and look at the underlying rhythms when you're going to think about where your parts should line up. Is anybody lost in that or have questions about that there? I can't see at the moment, so oh, here we go. Can you still, do you guys still see the Scotland the Brave screen, or you just see me now?
No, we see the screen with the white out.
Okay, cool. So bass drummers, when you're looking at those underlying rhythms, that is where you want to look at where you're going to play your bass drum notes. Okay. In this same Scotland the Brave concept here, when you're going to go play, and let's say that you're going to play a band tune for your solos, okay? Because that's sometimes just, that's what you have, right? Your piper and drummer, they know those really well, and you're going to go play these. When you're listening to this song, the music is always building a phrase for you, all right? So it's always going somewhere, and maybe the piping's going up. Dum bum ba dee da dee da dee da ba dee dum bum bum. Those are all little phrases in there that you can build in. What I oftentimes hear people do is they go to play Scotland the Brave in a solo, they play right over top of that melody, right? So if you're looking in the first two bars there, you can see that there's not a lot of notes, right? It's fitting right to the musical tune. Da, 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 da. I oftentimes hear a bass drummer come out and play da, 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 right over top of that melody, right? Instead of complementing into that melody there. So if you think about it, instead of da 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 dee 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 dum bum bum, from that context, you want to think about your rhythms maybe lining up more with the space that's being provided, not only in the snares there, but also what's going in the piping. So when a piper is really sitting and holding a note without getting into other, idioms of this, that is what I want to compliment in what they're doing. So that's something that I encourage you to think about when you're looking at what you're going to play. You're going to establish a tempo. You want to fit rhythmically, and you want to fit melodically to the tune that's going there. Okay, so that's a couple thoughts in that direction. The other thing is, when you're listening where the tune's going, it's telling a story, right? It's going up here, and then it's coming down. Dee dum ba dee dum bum bum ba dee dum bum bum. I will oftentimes hear someone go out and play a band tune, and they're going to play where their note fit into that tune. And an example of that would be dum bum ba dee dum be da dee da dee dee dum. It's just one random note that's put in there. Whereas if you kind of walk through that phrase and played a few more rhythms that will start and finish that musical journey, if you will, that where the bagpipe is going, or the snare core could be going with that. To me, that sounds more like a solo than when there's space and separation, because that is your note, and that does make sense when a tenor line is playing that in your band score. But then when you're playing it by yourself, it just sounds like a random note that's in there. So for me, I played a band tune at Winter Storm this year, and I had to go back and really untrain my brain because I switched around a few different phrases that were in there, and I played more tenor parts. Now, I didn't play as busy as a tenor part would play in there, but I added more in to build the phrase, rather than if I hadn't done that, I would have been out and maybe have just been a note in the tenor run. So if you thought about a tenor player going dum bum beep bum 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 there, how could you play that when you're coming out to play Scotland the Brave? Dum bum ba dee dum dee. I'm sorry, dum dum ba dee dum bum 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 dum ba-dee dum bum 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 ba-dee dum bum 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 ba-da-da-dee dum ba-dee dum bum 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 ba-dee dum bum 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 ba-dee dum be dum ba-dee. As an example. Now there's lots of different syncopation things that you can do in there where you could be playing in the upbeat and the downbeat, and playing back and forth between those. But understanding listening to where the pipes are going, and if the snares are building something that's following into that, a snare is doing a crescendo up in volume, then are you taking it there to the end of that buildup that they're doing? So they may be playing that you're finishing through that instead of that, and you're out, right? In a solo, you can play through that. In a band, maybe somebody else is finishing that whole musical phrase for you. And that's where some of the things that you want to separate. I think there's a few. Does anybody have a question for that before I move on to a couple other things along this lines? Okay, chime in if you do. I think the other thing that when you're playing these and you do start to play more notes, either your band is writing more notes in there for you to play, or if you're playing more notes as a solo player, you want to look at trying to vary the sounds off of the drum that you're going to get. And certainly if anybody's playing just bass, you understand the strong, weak, medium, weak idiom there. And if you're not, it's you're playing a loud and a soft and a medium volume and a soft again, and then loud again. So without diving too much into all the musical volumes from piano to mezzo to forte, there's lots of different volume variances that are in those. And, where there's not exactly articulation for each of those or each of these and how I'm going to explain it, I think about 5 different volumes that you can play. I think about 5 different volumes when I'm playing quiet, 5 different volumes in the middle, and 5 different volumes at the top. And the reason that I'm kind of overlying those is that probably if I was playing all of those different things, they're going to probably, the top tier of this level is probably going to fall into the next level there. But I will sit and play my tunes in a quiet and play, in a piano level and try to get 5 different variances out of there. Or think about it, even if you want to think about it as 3, right? Kind of like extra space. So play extra space, strong, weak, medium, weak. But can I play it at a forte? Can I play it in a mezzo volume? And can I play it in a piano volume down here? And what am I doing with my touch, right? And how am I getting that sound out when I'm playing? What does that feel like? Because sometimes when I got earplugs on, I really can't hear the boom. I mean, the best beat of the boom is on either side of me, right? So I kind of have to trust myself in that I'm getting that note out of the drum when I strike it. And I think when you get that comfortability with it, and that's where going back to get that memorization done and move on, you can start playing around with volumes and listening when the drum corps is doing a crescendo, from soft to loud, or going from loud to soft. We're doing that this year, and I just think it's really cool because you don't always get to do that from a bass drum perspective, where you go loud, boom, 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 down. That's some things to give you some volume variance. If the head is moving too much here, I know you won't be able to hear this too well from the mic, but the head's moving too many notes. How can you break that up? Right? It almost probably just sounds like a roll, especially in this room. But how can you break up the sounds of that? I try to get out of volume, 1, 2. I can do some other things like a little dead stick, which I find a subtle moment to put a dead stick in, and I'll play a hand-to-hand dead stick. I'll play the left to the right. The reason I like to do that, it almost gives me a tenor effect. Maybe something that, could have been played in a tenor, I can get out of the drum and be an effective subtlety. So a dead stick, I'm literally just taking the tip of the mallet and I'm angling right into the top there. So I just get a nice, clean clean dead stick in there. If I try to use the whole flat of the mallet here, it gets a little wompier on the sound there. I like to go right into the tip of that there. I think it just gives a little bit cleaner stick to the end. And I think if you have the opportunity, I'll play a left to a right or a right to a left. It gives a little bit different tone. So that might be something that you try, when you get on a bass drum and you're playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, set, right? 1, 2, 3, dead stick, 1, 2, 3, dead stick. Play around with that and see what the tones you can get out of. The other would be that I like to play off of this is I like to play a choke or a dampen, and I do the same thing. I take both of the tips of the corners of this mallet and go into the bass drum there. I think it gives a couple different effects, and when the bass drum is really booming, it really can do two things. You can play it a little bit heavy. I would caution you to play that too heavy. You probably get away with it in a medley performance. Really, what you're looking for is where it takes that bass from booming and the sound is going out, and you get whoop coming out, and you're deadening that in. So it's getting a whoop sound out of the drum. Whoop. So it kind of just takes the volume. If you ever played a subwoofer and you stick your hand where the subwoofer air is coming out, you can hear how that sound just kind of closes and dampens in. I like to use that in a moment where the pipes go up and sit in a high A for a moment. And I use that moment to really just kind of accent that moment. It could also be used in something where maybe the snares are going to a really doing a crescendo, and then they're going to stop and give a little bit of dead space there. You can use that to just dampen the drum and stop it from playing.
Ben,
so
we have a question there from Mary Wallace.
Perfect. Hi, Mary.
Hey, Ben. Hey, would you mind turning the screen sharing off and showing that dead stick example again?
Yep. Sorry about that. I didn't realize that was. Give me 1 second. Thanks for mentioning that. All right. Can you see me here?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. So I'll just revisit that a little bit here quickly. You've got the mallet here, and when I go to do a dead stick, as I would call it, I'm going to use this kind of corner area of the mallet there, because I think it just gives a little bit cleaner note out of the drum as opposed to using this whole side piece, because I think it doesn't give as good of a sound off of it. I think this dampens a little bit more, and I would encourage you to try that on your own bass drum and see what types of sounds you can get out of it from doing that and going in for a choke or dead stick, or if you got this and you do the dead stick that way. I think it gives just a little bit tighter sound off of it to do it. And same thing if I'm going for a choke, you got the drum resonating here, and I'm taking both hands in to dampen. Now, I'm not, and I don't know how well you can hear the audio here, but I'm just exaggerating with my hands. When I play here and I go in to do that choke, if I'm doing it too loud and heavy, it's going to give a note. It's going to give a bonk kind of sound that comes out of it. You can do that effectively, right? And maybe a hornpipe jig or a medley. This is totally my personal preference on that. So someone else may have a different opinion. But I think that if you're going to do it in something like an MSR, and you do it, that it should be something that kind of more just softens the drum and pulls the sound in to dampen it, which gives it kind of that sound. And again, I'm using that corner of the mallet to do that when I come in and dampen that. And I'm using that for a couple things. Piping tune. When they go up for like a high A note, something like that, I'm gonna go and dampen off the drum there. I just think that's a cool effect in some places. Probably also depends on what the snares might be doing in that as well. That's just one way you can do it. I like to do it on drag runs. If a drummer is doing a number of back-to-back drags, I've played the note into that choke there. And I'll just try to break up what's going on. If I'm playing right? And I want to play a cool rhythm for a solo. And there's a lot of notes. I go 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's in the dead sticks, and then the choke. Boom. And again, I'm going for more of a whoop sound than a boom boom choke, boom boom choke. I think sometimes it can be overplayed. So that certainly has got to be approved by your band. Lead drummer, pipe major, what's most effective in the ensemble. You don't want to overdo that. You want to give little like tasteful moments of that. Your solos, you're going to have more flexibility from that, but you do not want to overkill that in the band. Because when you're doing that, it sounds like you're constantly starting and stopping, starting and stopping, starting and stopping. So you want it to be something that complements the music if that's where it's supposed to be. But you could also use it if, say, the snare section was building up to a section where they are going to stop, which could be the end of the tune. But it could also be where they're going to break out and give a rest, which is really the next thing to talk about in sound is being conscious in your bass drumming of not playing the whole time, right? Sometimes you're playing and you're doing a really cool pattern, doom 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 chop, and then you're out. If people are like, oh, what are they doing, right? Where's this going? And there's lots of different ways that can really work in to what you're doing. And maybe the snares are still playing, but you come out and then you can come back in and provide that. What you're going to do is people are going to listen to the bass, right? You're the rocking part of this. You're the heartbeat of what's going on. They're jiving, and all of a sudden you stop, and they almost want it back, you know. And if you learn where those spaces are that you can give, and let the drum breathe and let the music breathe for a little bit, then when you come back in, it's like, oh, thank God he's back in. This is great, you know. They're like eating it up. And I think when you learn to kind of play on those moments, that you can really build your ensemble performance. So don't forget that rests are important. Volume variance and what you're playing in the notes is important. Listening to where the dynamics are going in your drum corps. You should be conscious when you're playing because you're a big drum. And when they're quiet, you can still be quiet and they're going to hear you play. They're going to hear that drum bellow out. So play that quiet note and build up as they're building up. And if you're playing kind of the end of a tenor note, something that might be a rhythmic moment, then think about your volume there, because I will also add that if you are out for a period of time as a bass drummer and you've got a rest for, I would say, probably more than 2 bars, and the snare corps, maybe, I'm just going to use this as an example. If the snare corps is building this long crescendo up, or what they're going to play is an accent, when you come back in, you don't have to overplay your drum because you've already been out. You've already had a rest. So when you come in, you're naturally going to give an accent to what they're doing without having to overplay that. And I think that oftentimes people will get on their score sheet bass section, you know, too dominant here or too loud here. And it's, well, you know, if you didn't hear anything, you can come in really quiet. And that's already louder than what it was, right? Same thing with chips, you know, use the same example with chips players, and they come in on top of the lead drummer. It's kind of the same concept. When you're out and you're not playing, the volume's down. You put 8 people playing on top of their lead drummer, it's naturally going to be louder. Same thing with the bass drum when you're out. So use those rests, and when you do come back in, you don't have to overplay, you know, your max volume when you've already been out for a couple bars, because it's already going to sound loud when you come back in. Any questions, comments there on volume, stick touch?
I don't know if this is part of this or if you're going to cover it, Ben, but could you briefly go over how you set the drum up for dampening and pitch and all that kind of thing?
Yep. So I mostly when I set the drum up, I have it tuned to a 480, and then I'll dive into kind of how I set it up. Typically tuned to 480. You know, here for sure especially in Florida, hot climate, you go to Pleasanton and it's hot. The pipes are going to race. I don't chase the sound all the way up to a 488 if the pipes are going up that high. I don't do that tuning wise for a couple reasons. I've done that before, and when you do that, you're stretching the head on the drum. And then for me, then I'm going to go to Scotland and play where it's not going to be that high, right? And now I'm trying to balance the sound out because I've already stretched all these different parts of the drum out, and now I'm trying to get the head to settle back in and sound good at a lower pitch, and you can get a little bit more of a flub sound. So just saying that this is what I do. I know there's lots of maybe different opinions on that. I probably wouldn't go higher than 484. I think it can also be subject to. I will say I've gone out in a contest, and I had this in a solo contest, and this was tuned below the pipe, but I was told that it was slightly sharp. Okay, slightly sharp to the pipe. You know, I would say probably not, but maybe slightly sharp to the other drums that were being judged that day. That could be a big possibility. I played it recently. A lot of really great judges, and they loved the sound. I was at 482 on the pitch, and the pipes were much higher than that because it was a 90-degree day, full of humidity. So I don't chase the sound too high. Did I come up a little bit because of the heat? Yes. When I'm setting up the drum, I'm a tension meter person. I use a tension meter a lot, and I mostly, really for me, when I'm first setting the drum, I use that tension meter a lot because, again, I don't want to overstretch one section versus another section because I feel like I will fight that section the whole year. So the tension meter will give you what the tension is of this head. It's this little device. You can buy it on Amazon, and it will tell me basically how tight or how loose this head is. What's the tension on it? And I will go around the drum and listen, look at what that meter is. But I want to do a couple of things when I do that. I want to see what note is it already at. Maybe I'm at 482 and that's where I want it to be. Okay. I'm at 482. I'm at A. What's the tension? And what I want is I want this to be as even around on both sides of the drum because it's going to give me the most resonance out of the drum so that sound carries out through everyone. So when I go around, I look at this and maybe it says 482A, I got the right note, but is the drum in tune with itself? I'm going to go around and check these and see where they are. Some are higher, some are lower on the meter, but I'm also going to check the other side. Okay, because I want this to be the same tension as this side is when I do that. I think that gives the maximum volume. I could take this one side. If this was off and say it was a 480 and I wanted 482, I could take the key around and get it to 482. But is the drum giving the best sound off of both sides of it, or is one side choked more than the other in that? And I would argue that in that scenario that it is. So I will look and see where the tension meter is. Just take a number off the, say it's 40. Okay, this is 40, this is 42, this is 40, this is 40, this is 40. Well, that one's a little high, right? So I want to back this 42 down to be 40, where the bulk of these are. And then check and make sure my note's right, right? So I want it to be balanced. And if one is too high, I bring it down because I don't want it to overstretch. I can always bring it back up. But if it's stretched out, then I could risk having a flub out of it. And then I'm going to bring it back up. But I'm also going to make sure this side is also at 40, right? And there might be a 44 or whatever. And I want to try to dial that in. So I think when that's set up from the beginning, you've not overstretched your head, or you've not overstretched a certain part of it, because I feel like you can chase that all year round. Oh, why is it giving a ping or a poing off of it, or a flub for a bass. So I do that heavy on the tension meter to make sure it's accurate. And I really find that if you set it up from the beginning, when you do that, that you're not having to chase the sound as much afterwards. So we go to a contest. I'll get the drums, depending if it's a climate change, without getting too over detailed. Wherever you're going, let the drum settle in for a little bit to the temperature, right? It could have been on a plane or a bus or whatever, and it's been in a hot car, and then you're getting out. Let it just acclimate. And then I'm going to go around and I'm going to set it and get it close to where I want it to be. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect, on the first one. I just want to make sure it's close and not overstretched. Then I'm probably going to play at our band practice that night and get the heads moving a little bit, or maybe you just play on your own. And then I'm going to come back and recheck it. But for me, once I go to the contest day, it's typically usually pretty set at that point that I'm not having to mess with it too much. I'm just checking a final note on it, really, from bass or tenor. And there's, I could probably talk for an hour on that, which I know I don't really have that time. There are other things. I know some people don't love a tension meter. I think that it's a foolproof way to make sure that the head is balanced with itself, and then you can take it to the note. So I always dial it back if it's too high. If it's at a 44 and the bulk of the other lugs are at 40, I'm going to dial it back. But what you're going to notice is when you take tension off of here, this might change on the other side. So I dial that back. I'm going to go check here. Okay, are we still at 40? I'm going to check a few spots around. Did it change these two? Because it probably changed this and it probably changed this. And I'm going to check and see when I back that off. Did this go to 38 when that was at 42? It might have. If I back that back to 40, this one that was at 40 could have gone to 38, because this tension in this quadrant was being manipulated by that one, right? And this one was too loose. And this one was making up for that in the sound. So don't know if I over-explained that there or if everybody's following along, but that's a simple, if you have a question, feel free to chime in. That's a simple concept in how I'll try. And again, for me, both sides are really important than one side. I think that's where you get a lot of awkward sounds coming out of the drum.
Great. Does anybody else have any questions for Ben?
Yeah, I have a question about dampening. Do you find that there's a minimum of number of dampeners? Do you put dampeners on your drum and you put them on the lug or between the lugs, or what is
I have done all those things. These are the Remo Power Max heads, and there is a dampening that's in this head. I mean, you can see the little ring that comes around it, and then I literally just take that head and put it right on the drum. I actually don't have any kind of dampening in here, and I don't have any dampening in any of our tenors. I use those heads, and I have done that with other drums, and done the hot glue. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you just have the heads that have the dampening ring built right into them.
I do.
Okay. And
I think it's the most user friendly. When you get into the other ones and you're doing it yourself, like, it can really shift, especially that glue, and we're in a hot climate and moisture like that. That stuff can move around in there, and how much contact, if you have a square in there, how much of that square is pushed into the head on this side versus another side. Depends on, where it's lined up. I'm using this and I've been happy with it. So.
And also, the height that you play the drum at, is that so that you're always striking in the middle, or is there another reason for the height that you play it high?
I think it's probably because I watched Haas in the 78th and thought my bass drum should be high, and I thought that looked cool. Or Johnny Rowe go out and play, and the bass drum's up here, and I don't know. I just always thought that was kind of a cool look, so I put it up there. I mean, this is lower than where it would be for me on the harness. I mean, the harness of my drum is probably up that high, and I don't know. I think I probably just think about the height of that going out over the band when I'm playing. So I
Thank you.
Sure.
I've
What's your question?
sorry. One, I can kind of talk to both of those items just a touch here. So I have tried doing my own dampening on heads, both at my grade 4 band, well, mostly at the grade 4 band. And I have never, ever, my brother's been doing drumming for 35 years, and it has never, ever, ever been successful. So the pre-dampened heads really work really well. They're very, very good. I also wear my bass drum ridiculously high. The center point, I almost look at the center point. If I could see through the drum, I am almost looking at the center point of the drum. And in my case, I have a bad back, so it makes it up the higher it is, allows me to lean back just a touch so that it's not like I have this great big thing pulling me forward the whole time. And it allows me to make better movements with my arms. So it's just, again, Ben may have other different things that he does, why he does it. You may have other reasons why you wear it where you do. I wear it really high because it helps my back a lot.
And I'll add on that too. One point that I meant to mention earlier and kind of getting the memorization going so you're ready is, and we're talking about like getting on the drum and playing. I do play on a stand. I don't wear it all the time, but when I know a contest is coming, I start wearing it on the harness because I know it's going to be elevated, and I want to start practicing it where my hands are supposed to be on that drum. But the other thing is I'm using different muscles in these shoulders because now my shoulders are lifting up here to play, and I don't want to be out in the contest thinking my shoulder hurts, right? I want to be out in the contest myself and playing. So I will make sure that I get on the drum well before a contest. I can kind of work through those muscles. And if you look up PVC pipe stretching, I have a PVC pipe, and that's a great way. They have some really great stretches to get your shoulders open, which I think just protects you for the long run in bass drumming or tenor playing, because you're lifting up and you're constantly working those shoulder muscles. And I think you can look up PVC pipe stretching on YouTube, and they have some really great things that I do utilize to just get my shoulder opened up for when I am going to swing my arms for a contest. I'll make sure that I'm ready so I'm nice and comfortable, and it keeps the fluidity going there, but it also helps the drums up, and you're going to play up here, and those arms are going. So good thought there.
Any other questions for Ben?
Yeah, I've got one. It's not a quick one, maybe, but it wanted to also add that as a testament about wearing the drum high, I find it does take pressure off your back. But for bands that have like limited resources and things, how often do you recommend changing those heads?
I would say that varies. I mean, I'm changing mine once a year. I just want to keep the freshest sound going. So I think that's good. I make sure, try to do that 6 weeks before a contest and let that head settle in a little bit before you're going out. I have done it right before a contest. As far as timeline in between, I would say what's the sound you're getting out of that drum? Because I know you have a good ear, Mary. So if you're listening to that drum and it's getting a wampling and a wobbly thing, and you're going around with the tension meter and you can't get it to align with itself and get a good sound out of it, then you probably overstretch that head at some point, which may not have come, that could have come from sitting in a hot car too long or sitting in the sun. And some people are big on in the sun, out of the sun, all that. I don't get too much into that really. I just try to tune the drum and go out there and have it sound good. But if you'll know the sound of that drum if it's good or not. And that could be the head. And if you do use that tension meter and go around, one, you're going to know from your ear, but two, use a tension meter and it's out of whack with itself and you can't dial it into the pitch that you want it and get a good sound, then it's probably time to replace that head. And you're going to get more of a flub or a wobble sound out of it. Then you're going to get a nice boom. It should resonate. You should be able to touch that head and it just, sing on its own. So one, you should know from touch. Two, you should know from your ear. Three, is dialing in on the tension meter and getting to the pitch that you want. And I use the INS tuner on my iPhone when I tune. INSTUNER. That's what I use because I can set get the settings right the way I want it, and it seems to work fine for me on that. If you're on a budget, then you kind of got to go with the time frame that you have, and so you can get new ones. But the drum will tell you if it needs to be replaced, in my opinion.
Okay, thanks.
I do sometimes hear, especially in I hear the bands just tighten the head too much or try to chase the sound because the pipes are climbing to 488 or 490 and they try to go there and they stretch these heads out and then they can't get it back to a normal sound. And then they're always having to tune that bass drum to 488 or 490 to try to get the sound right. It's just too high for me. So I would encourage you to keep it lower. Don't chase the pipes with it on a hot day, and that'll probably let your head last a little bit longer. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did.
Okay.
Anybody else? Hearing none. Ben, can't thank you enough for spending an hour and a half of your weeknight here with us. Thank you again very, very much. I learned something tonight. So as old as I am, I didn't think I could learn anymore, but great stuff. Really, really good. And thank you all for attending. You can tell your mates that this will be up on our YouTube channel in a couple of days if they want to take a look at it. But Ben, thanks again very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate you.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Jim.